Okay, is this working? Um, this is one out there for Zoom World. If you can hear us, say something in the chat and let us know, okay? Oh, no, it's on. It's on. I might need to turn it up a little bit, but I can hear it. I think it might actually be at 100%. I checked it earlier. Gonna get it a little bit out of my face. Let's see if I can. Um, is that? Oh, okay. Maggie says we can hear, so we can hear. Okay, great. I think we're gonna get started in just a couple minutes. So Matt will be coming up, but it seems like we're all just sort of settling in. And hey, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm if I can, I will, but I think it said 100 when I yeah. It doesn't go to 11. I'm going to try to speak up as much as I can. Oh, it's saying the mic's at 100, but not the speakers. Let me check that. Okay. All right, is that better? Better? Okay. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna step out of the way in a second because I think Matt's gonna come up here first, but I can just sort of, do a little show for a bit. Um, I know, right? Vamp. I'm vamping. I'm vamping. Oh no, what do I do? Um, so yeah, I'm gonna duck out of the way for a sec and I'll be back later. One thing.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is such an exciting night. It is always such a big deal and a thrill when there's a new book of poetry out in the world, but it is an especially exciting moment when it is a debut collection that is hard earned and something that is such a cause for celebration as this book.
Okay, that's good. Oh,
That's on. Okay. Is this too loud? Is that okay? And can people in Zoom land hear me now? Welcome to everyone also in Zoom land. I'm sorry we don't have options for cheese for you. Is there anything in the chat?
you can chant now.
I think we should chant Jen.
Okay, we're good.
We're good?
I'm hearing.
And is this volume okay? Or do you want it a little louder? All good? Awesome. All right. It is now my honor to introduce Jen. It is hard to know where to begin any discussion of Jen's debut collection of poems, Girl in a Bear Suit, which is so profound and hilarious and brilliant and strange and very much its own wonderful thing. There's the opening poem, which self-consciously announces itself as an act of disambiguation of the tragic story of Callisto, one of the many core obsessions in this book. Callisto, the poem tells us, may refer to one of Jupiter's moons, or someone transformed into a bear, or an ongoing blurring between bears and girls, which gives way in beautiful short order to the speaker's description of her teenage goth makeup, which is followed in turn by some tacit finger pointing at anyone who might actually enjoy spending time on cruise ships. And thus one knows from the very outset of this book that you've never read anything quite like it. Even more importantly, the title's promise of explanation is most certainly genuine. And this piece, like many others in Jen's book, works to elucidate narrative through those unexpected veers, meaning that this poem quite wisely holds misgivings about the efficacy of any linear logic to account for the terrible anguish and grotesque injustices embedded in so many of our inherited myths. Girl in a Bear Suit instead relies on associative leaps to find its footholds, taking its cue perhaps from the many swift-moving metamorphoses of Ovid, while also deliberately leaning into what the book calls, and I absolutely love this phrase, our knife-toss wheel imaginations. If you buy and read this book, which you absolutely owe it to yourself to do, you will find yourself ambushed by formal inventiveness, by what the poet Carrie Fountain praises as its heat-seeking playfulness, and by a tonal range that can move in an instant from humor to simmering rage and its clear-eyed vision of who we are and what we are capable of. You'll also encounter gestures in poem after poem that I can guarantee you've never seen anyone else do. There's a piece structured as a dramatis personae for each of the three merciless gods complicit in Callisto's death. There are instructions to read a particular line aloud in a scrunched low voice. There's an intimate address to the reader that's immediately countered with the phrase, ugh, that's so embarrassing. And in one of my favorite poems in the collection, there's a toggling between a taxonomy of metamorphosis and lines of rhapsodic blessing. May you never be one, the poem says, and means it. May you be granted long life, then held in the after by your best others' branches. In Christopher Citro's foreword to Girl in a Bear Suit, you will encounter a contest judge who thinks about Jen's work as a boundless blessing in itself. I have never read an introduction to a poetry collection that was so unabashedly blissed out. It's true. You should read it. It's so infectious and wonderful. At one point, seemingly unable to stop quoting the book's phrases that give him endless delight, Citro begins air boxing around the room, rejoicing in the small fluttering of each line he reads. And this is his quote: "The years of passion, intelligence, heart, and craft, inspiration, generosity, and creativity that goes into these poems is a whole sky full of wings beating in our direction. Lucky us," Citro exclaims, "and lucky us that we have the privilege and absolute joy of not only having the opportunity to hear some of these poems right now, but also have the actual Jen Jabaily-Blackburn here at Smith and in the daily orbit of our lives. It is such a thrill to have this dazzling book out in the world. And as you listen to and experience these poems, you too will be absolutely forgiven if you feel the need to jump up and unable to contain yourself, airbox around the room. Please welcome Jen.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was an incredible introduction, and I have no idea what I've done to deserve this. Like all I did was write this book. Uh, but thank you so much, and thanks for your support of all of this, of me as a poet. Like I'm doing poetry all the time, but I'm usually doing it for other people. Like this is a weird experience to be on this side of the microphone. So thank you everyone for being here tonight. I am going to start a timer so I have a good idea of how this is going, time-wise. So yeah, I got my little set list here and my page numbers, which feels very smart now. I can't believe the forethought. Mike just left. So yeah, I'm gonna start with a piece. It is called Ars Poetica, as many as bones in the human body. In the shift from tired to sleepy, the schematic of a robot who'll brush my teeth arrives. Sleepy, just how a child would say. A robot like something we once met in a cartoon. If unforeseen repercussions arose, I've forgotten. I want a machine to incinerate the dishes and reprint them on demand. This thought bisects the sink's lank scuzz. A machine to break and remake dishes, laundry, slack thoughts, unhealed bones. It's called the Phoenix Box. This elevator pitch only works if the building housing the elevator is built like a Mobius strip. Earl Grey, hot, you might think, eyebrow tipped conspiratorially. But what I want is not tea. Not even a sudden arrival of honey in my tea. I'm an adult. It's not hard to find honey. On breaking glass in the market, I move to help, but a manager looks at me like, lawyers. I stand there, useless. A teenager in a green smock arrives to sweep it into a tray. The manager senses my offer to pay is insincere, if plausible. What I actually want? No machine, no intermediary. To hold out my hand and for a whole jar of honey to materialize, plasmatic, like a sun. Then, in the other hand, by God, another. Thanks. All right. I I'm already like mixing up the playlist. See, it's wild. I'm actually the piece that Matt had mentioned earlier. I'd like to do that now. This is the many exciting possibilities of metamorphosis. Not all rocks are rocks. Some are observed to cry, but never know it. Some cry reverberant with lost children. Some rivers disappear underground and reappear somewhere safer. Some flood out of pure panic. If you find you are now a tree, may you be a tree where no one has ever known you. May they not harvest your limbs. May you never be one. Maybe you'll be granted long life, then held in the after by your best other's branches. May you become a wild thing and not remember the idea of hunter before his arrow has gone and translated you to stars. May you rest under a dome of snow in dreamless sleep, no clock but the sense the air is full again, no blank, cold scent of ozone. You could become a boring gray bird who gets 3 odd more winters, or a bird who makes boring birds struggle in her beak. Maybe one night you'll go to sleep by a can of springwork snakes and wake up a mass of live snakes decorating the head of a creature who's never existed before or since. May you then make your own creature who doesn't look a bit like you, a creature in need of 2 saddles. The solid first to hold a rider, the other a mother's invisible wish to fly. May you serve yourself in this new life. Oh. All right. So, a little bit of context. I said I wasn't going to like vamp the whole time, but like I totally am. I'm very much like a stage patter poet. I'm like blah 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 blah, everything I've ever learned. So this poem's called 409 Bead Nose. If people recognize that name, you recognize that name immediately. Um, 409 is the number, Bead Nose is the name. She was one of the Fat Bear Week bears from the thing that they hold at Katmai every year. It's a great like awareness of bears and their habitat. But like they're all good bears. They're all good bears. But like Bead Nose was something special. So 409 Bead Nose. Having burnt my back pink in the shower, I feel such love and pity for the sockeye salmon, whose skin turns bright red in spawning season. When you think of salmon, you think of their flesh the color of a summer Republican's knee-length belted shorts, only appealing. If you cut open a red-skinned spawning salmon, its inner flesh will be white as a moon or tooth. A bear will eat salmon because a bear doesn't care if the salmon makes it to its spawning grounds. A salmon doesn't care if it makes it to its spawning grounds. The skin of a male salmon in spawning season is brighter than that of the female. I have to stop myself from saying she gives some of the carotenoid from her flesh to her eggs. That's just where it's routed. A bear will eat a salmon and will not feel like it is buffing its neural pathways with oil and a cloth. But a human might. A female bear does not often fish on the falls of the Brooks River, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. 409 Bead Nose, a large, but importantly not by all metrics the largest female, used to do just this, swatting leaping salmon to her mouth just yards from more dominant, more aggressive males. Heroin material. 409 was not spotted on the cameras last year, which either means she died young or went somewhere away from the cameras for food. I try to remain neutral in the face of science, but I want her to be out there, away, well-fed and fed up with fighting. The wild version of over it. The Alaska brown bear is less a dour, solitary creature than one that will tolerate others if no one gets too close. I'm reminded of a vest I once saw in an airport on 409's distant cousin, a panic-faced dog, neon and emblazoned with the words, "Give me space." As interpretations go, it's the work of a generous human trying to get it right. Most often, we are wrong. The water goes warm in a heat wave, and some sockeye die before reaching the lake, while others hold back. It is not bravery. Mm. All right, I might skip ahead for now. So the core of this collection, Matt had mentioned a little bit of this in the introduction. There is the story of Callisto from Ovid's Metamorphoses. So, shortest version, Callisto was a like humanoid. She was a nymph, whatever. It's fine. Figure, but a woman figure who was turned into a bear as a form of punishment. Um, as usual, this is nothing that she should have had any blame for, any accountability for, but that's how these stories work. So you have Callisto, who was a hunter walking around in this bear form, where it's terrifying, it's uncomfortable. It is definitely meant to be punishing. And I've been reading these stories since I was Coraline's age. So like I Coraline's waving. Um, but these are things that I've been thinking out for a long, long time. And something that strikes me about this story in particular, though like so many others like it, is that, what if you had the chance to think of it as not being fully punishing, like that it could be difficult, it could be a challenge, but it could also be survivable. So I have all of these Callisto poems. I'm only going to read a handful of them. There's a whole bunch of others. They go off in wild directions, but I'm trying to just keep it tight, you know. So this I'll read their um subtitles to give you some context. So this is Callisto, Applied Classics. I woke up brilliant in a forest, chock full of new intelligences. The woven nets of scent drag me miles from myself. Dizzying in the same way that trying to grasp the horizon makes a person feel sick and giddy. Suddenly the thought, I have a bank account, lands like a lash of vinegar on bicarb. The fizzy giggles, oh my God, what would they do with this? Living back there was to act pressed between glass slides, to be cross-sectioned and mounted, and then I woke up brilliant, i.e., the moon fell through the furs like mylar ribbon over my eyes, and I thought, does the moon on waking, first thing, lift her shirt to inspect her stomach, to see how it fails to pass muster today? Does she? The fuck? This is a peaceful village, the neighbors back there love to telegraph. This is a peaceful village. Please read that with a scrunched low voice and a jolly hoedown waggle of the arms like, how a civic Rumpelstiltskin would say. The old tea shop's floor-to-ceiling drawers always looked poised to speak, a gallery of silent faces never successfully saying, ooh. This pleased the neighbors, as if they could shut up a room by just stepping over a threshold. Either they will not know me, or they will know me immediately. These changes to me feel cosmetic, a logical, if impractical, extension. The collective noun for knives in a block is a slumber. That one's never catching on with the neighbors. The kids are mirroring me, taping butter knives to their fingers. It's hilarious. The neighborly thing for me, for them, would be just to wait out there, bewildered, black hole spawning bang in the middle of Park Street. Just sit tight, brace myself for their spring. So this one, if the first line sounds a little bit familiar, it's because I'm absolutely ripping off sort of the first line of Rebecca. Um, I couldn't help myself. This is Callisto and the Mad Honey. Last night, I dreamt I went to Dairy Queen again. I went to the grocery store, and Stress ate fistfuls of Cavolo Nero, and no one so much as looked at me. I melted in a bath of sheer proximity, felt the warmth of a crowd like dough coming together, the glutinous matrix of a world in making. I felt entirely osmosed and molecular. Last night, I dreamt I held a dear friend in a steam bath. He would hate this. But just like an Italian painting of Jesus, everything felt guilt and serious. A Giotto with lines of red spider silk renovating a holy man's heart. Except just between us, I was embarrassed by the intimacy, but my lips direct to God. Last night, I dreamt a man in a broad-brimmed hat hemmed me into his chest, then settled my body alone into a sun-warm bed of a pickup truck, where lazy clouds disassembled overhead and reformed into a Georgian riviera of citrines and gold. What can I say except everybody's living in a material lair? And last night, I swear I dreamt I was only a girl again, who went type, type, type about her moods in the cold, high garret of her skull. Just one small, endless coal, and a mouse in a teapot for company. Irregular as ever, a wave in confused sea, ending in a gentle, icy curl. I guess a note that I forgot with that poem that might give some context. Some of you might already know about Mad Honey and what Mad Honey is. So some of you are nodding your heads. It's, I think, from a particular kind of rhododendron in limited areas of the world. If bees make honey after getting like pollen and nectar from this rhododendron, it could be like psychoactive. So creatures that eat this honey are going to start just seeing things. And I figured, well, what would that be like from the bear's perspective? Um, so the next one, some of these Callisto pieces, they're sort of, I think, by necessity polyvocal. You have these competing voices. You have the bear voice and the girl voice that, like, sometimes they want the same thing, but most of the time they really don't. And they don't know how to communicate with each other. So this one sort of highlights those issues of communication. This is Callisto, survival. In a panic, The girl remembers something called bear trap. Actually called bear trap. It takes all I have not to yell at her, but she should have been paying better attention because I don't know what it looks like, and now she can't remember. And I'm not saying you have to be shitting me, and she feels me not saying it. We have very different ideas about survival. I wasn't safe living so close to the humans, and she insists on preserving everything for an artifact. At the smallest burning trace of human, she goes running up like, people, 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 people. Like a dog, I tell her. Like a dog. The girl is making less and less sense. Have you ever been to the movies? She said. Do you know what movies are? I said, come on, dummy. Of course I've been. And fine, I don't really remember. Her favorite movie, she called it educational, was about two humans, a man and a woman, living inside a white-haired but not old man. There was a magic man with a broken bowl who could separate them. She threw her voice into focus and said, Fishbowl, then waited for me to reply. Fishbowl, and waited again, leaving the blanks for me to fill in. Fix the bowl, she said quietly. It's fix the bowl. But I didn't know. For us, no bowl to fix. She thinks every person is a magic man coming to pull us apart. I know it. Suddenly, the girl remembers. Right, 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 she said. The relief swelling our chest, pitching our shoulders back. Right. It's a set of eager teeth, these stainless, eager teeth. So that's that. The citizens have agreed forest is vital to the landscape. High-level predators are welcome to rejoin it, conditionally. But what out here is not a trap? They hang little bundles of seed and fat just high enough for us to reach. The measurement one inexperienced bear high. Or, oh God, that deer in the woods that stung when we tried to touch it. And she gasped at the wires stuck into it, coming from the little humming box. Now we're getting to the point where we can no longer claim an experience. I'm gonna read one more from the Callisto series. It's one of the last poems in it. This is like niche Smith College content in here. So, there's, you might have noticed this, maybe, there's this plaque on College Hall, and it says that there's a memorial for a tree, but nothing is there. Like the tree that it mentioned is not around. So if you're wondering, like, that's a weird specific thing, I've seen that before. Yes, you have. Um, this is Callisto Memorials. Her old life is small in me. I try to carry her less like a child and more a mother too injured to understand. Perhaps the loved one sent her away in love, a passenger in a pearlized car, top down and never again to reign. Perhaps she has become most visible, blue beautiful in absence. The air over the table smiles but doesn't put a word wrong. I won't imagine a table at which she is not missed. She once saw a plaque reading, "This fir tree adjacent memorializes," next to a space with no fir tree there. If they still think of her much too muchness, perhaps they will imagine it spilling into another story where she wasn't expected. One of a handful of sailors in an impossible boat, off to explore an ungraspable West, a dream West not earmarked for stealing, priceless para-West of the mind. A cap of waves splashes tangerine over the hull. Perhaps there I will be distilled, all crystal shaken out, no matter, all shadow. Perhaps allowed to walk without end, without tiring. The rest I leave to you. Okay, I got a couple of requests, so I'm going to read my requests. Page 32. So this is like a hard shift from the Callisto stuff, but I figured we might as well like get kind of fun back into it. So this is called For Gene Kelly. A stare never rang the right bells in me. No, sir. I am Gene Kelly's girl. Always wanted to be Sid Charisse, rippling off your arm like a sail everywhere, disappearing, reappearing. Sometimes it seemed you were pure energy, compressed and desperate to burst. The ballet with Caron in Paris. Fucking hell, it makes me want to take off all my clothes and then get more clothes on just to remove them. How did we let you fall out of fashion? It's nothing short of criminal. Oh, you jester, you kestrel, you lynx, you lion, don't look at me. I can't explain it. Muscles are having a zeitgeist moment. No love left for spark and smolder. We like our beefcakes ostentatious. All these abs, these delts, these pecs as hard as deglutenized loaves. Our century's tastes are questionable. You had muscles, but used them. Our stars are Range Rovers bought for conquering Brooklyn. It's still searing to think of your boundless legs failing, but I saw it. They trotted you out after the stroke to collect a medal. It was endless, ugly, unholy, an act of vandalism in a cathedral. Why are they doing this? I remember thinking. Xanadu was a mercy next to this. You were going out the way you wanted. The whole giddy future zooming up on roller skates. Like anything could catch you on roller skates. Um, all right. I think I'm trying to like be mindful of time. I don't want to keep you here all night. I do want to read a couple of new pieces. So I'm going to read, I think, one or two more from this and then one or two new ones. So this is page 96. I can find it. Duet for fiddle and violin. I grew up believing fiddle was the immature form of violin. See, grub, larva, nymph. When I was 17, I could have described the precise shade of lipstick my leveled up self would wear once I became a violin person. Heel crushed cacao. When I was 17, there was a movie about a red violin entering lives across centuries. I haven't seen it. That's not important. In it, each owner discovers the name tag hidden inside the violin. Hello, my name is something illegible. It is either very rare or the other thing. But how one held it and felt outside time, whole and chosen, planetary as a plum in light. Where I've written the red violin, please hear it with Baroque flourishes, bloody, double-stopped. The red violin lived through wars, never knowing if it caused them. And no one ever told it when the wars ended. It only saw people could laugh and kiss and stay in hotels and ride trains to the seaside again. Had it taken itself to the sea, the red violin might have discovered love under a meringue gazebo. Or it might have suffered from salt air supposedly miraculous for human lungs and vague female conditions. I have a violin, plainest brown, our impulse purchase, our simple fiddle. Once in a while, it's suddenly made visible, hoisted like an infant from its velvet-lined case. It sits awkwardly through our odes to joy, our Eau Claire de la Lunes, the kind of tune a child should be able to play. Little fiddle, I might yet hold you in front of a red curtain inside a perfectly round projection of moon. Lips brown as blood, one. This is the same word we use for hostages, held, like an egg in a soft mouth. Look, while you sleep, I will plaster your case with hotel labels, Venice, Zanzibar, Blue, Marseille. I will ask how you enjoyed the sea. Oh, all right. I'm gonna do a couple of new ones and then I might finish with one from the book. So this is I just to explain, like I have a bit of a complicated relationship with something that we talk about a lot in poetry, and it's the body as a stand-in for gender, for expression, for pain, like just a bunch of challenging things that I don't know what to do with. Um, so this is, you can have your grief after you finish all the body. The brain will perform radical acceptance when necessary. I say this not as an expert, only a long-time brain owner slash operator. Years ago, all my wisdom teeth had to come out. Under gas, I heard a surgeon disassemble my jaw with something that looked like a fairy's hammer and can, unsettlingly, be bought on Amazon by anyone. And I started to cry. The surgeon paused to ask if it hurt. As from a distant island, I replied, "No, I'm just crying." This felt surprisingly obvious and actually true. I got on with my waiting. He got on with his work. He hammered out the fragments until they weren't part of me anymore. I did not ask to keep them. As he worked, I remember him whistling the way people do when setting out to drive a hungry spirit away. Let's see, this one's new, but I've had fun reading it, so I'm just gonna do it and then I'll close with the last one. Um, so this is I've like resisted forever writing poems about like family or family history. I feel like very strange about it. I don't know why, but like I think sometimes there are strange things that I can't actually reconcile. And I'm like, well, what does this mean? What does this mean for like where I got to now? Um, and I was looking at a family tree. It's my mother's family. Hi, Mom. Um, and I saw that there was someone from her mother's family whose name was Velville. And I was just like, that's such an interesting name, and I want to know more. So this is Velvel, I guess. What do I know about us? One of us was called Velvel, Little Wolf. One of us raised horses. Someone was in grain. 6 sisters threw potatoes across a river in Pennsylvania. Once at a fair, I met a horse performing simple equations with large dice. Sure, it was a trick, but being charmed costs so little. I have so many debts I have no interest in paying. I'm sorry, I'm not more sorry. I'm sorry, I'm no creature you could have dreamed of. I dream of horses too, but they only ever bring me joy. I only ever bring them sugar. And my horses always do just what I tell them, which is nothing. Um, okay. I almost made it on time, guys. So close. So I'm gonna just close with one more from the book. Um, this this is called Comedy too. Hello. Um, Jeff Gillis is in the house, you guys. Um, Comedy too. So help me. I love when people call a thing a modern invention. Unbroken sleep, for example, as prior generations slept in phases, waking to read, to push coals around, to eat a plate of cheese and pickle, to tickle each other, imitate birds, to interpret dreams, pray, I guess, play an accordion, shift a skirt for ease of dancing, to throw bodies back together and apart. Pleasure is definitely a modern invention for some. I'm baffled by a sighing, I was born into the wrong era, like there's some urge we can no longer access. Listen, I'm a poet. I can stick a really real phoenix feather in my hair at any time. You too could do this. Marcia Belsky says she has a sort of we should all quit vibe that bosses don't really like. Same, same. I am a woman. We, friends, are women. Historically, the best time for us to be alive will be tomorrow. All right. Yeah. All right. So I think we're gonna go over there. We have to share the mic so people on Zoom can hear us. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Greg's gonna do that. Yeah. Oh, right. You're on the thing. Okay. Okay. Coraline's gonna make sure it's no, no. I think we're gonna have a conversation.
Jen Blackburn. That was so wonderful. And I love those new poems too, but that whole reading was so. Can we get one more round of applause? That was so great. Thank you so much for that. Um, I wanted to I wanted to start with a question about the bear in a room. I want to ask about the collection and how this body of work came about, specifically with the Callisto poems. I mean, you started to talk about this, but I wonder if you could just say a little bit more, as someone who's been reading Ovid and steeped in Greek mythology. Like, what was it, do you think, that about the Callisto story in particular that really tugged on your sleeve? And not only that, but became for you something that you knew you couldn't relinquish through the course of just one poem, for instance?
Well, that's a really good question. Um, so I I mean the short answer that doesn't answer anything is yeah, I've been reading these stories for my whole life. So they are ways for me to enter into other stories. Um, the I think like and I think a lot of poets probably find this familiar. I will think in metaphor and things that are relative to each other. And that's just like it is the metaphor that I keep coming back to. And the source of so many metaphors that I keep coming back to. Um, I think like I never finished a classics minor and I feel a little silly about it because I think I probably could have. So I'm coming at this as someone who like knows these stories really well, but like I'm not a scholar of them per se. But like a lot of the stuff that I remember feeling really urgent was like, Ovid himself, when he was writing these stories, he knew why he was writing them. And it was a project to build an empire. So, like, he's repurposing and remaking this like vast mythology that's propping up the Roman Empire. And if anyone knows anything about Ovid, I don't know if there are any like actual classic scholars in the room, but like it doesn't end well for Ovid at all. He dies in exile on the Black Sea in I think what's now Romania. It was it was not a good time, and we don't really know what happened. Like that's another thing about poetry that really interests me. It's sort of like there's a lot of addressing the not knowing what happens. So, when I think about these stories, I think of them as being something to hold up a system that was not friendly, did not treat women particularly well. He did, to give him credit, he wrote the Heroides later, so it's like a bunch of monologues from women's point of view, and like that in part also feeds into the like angle of response here. But like why Callisto and why the bears? Like bears are such a fascinating animal to me. They're they're one of our like big scaries, like it's lions, tigers, and bears. But it's also, especially like in my mind, usually I'm thinking of the American black bear, which are the ones that we'll see around here. Bead nose obviously is the big difference. But these are very large animals. They can be intimidating animals to people, but like they are so skittish. They don't want to be around us. They don't want to engage with us. And like, I don't know, also if that's not poetry, I don't know what is. So, it's that sort of observing the world from a place of feeling like not sure what to do with it and not sure that it's built for them. Um, yeah, I the first one, so I wrote a Callisto poem, like tiny Callisto poem a long time ago when I was a student. Um, but like the first real Callisto poem I wrote was after going to McLeish. And I was just walking around the field station and this was such a weird thought. I thought, oh my God, I miss when I used to have a gas stove that I could turn on and things would cook so well. And like that is an absurd thing to think when you're like out in the woods and exploring nature. And I'm just like, I cannot separate these things. This is like being in these spaces all at the same time. It's just how we live. So long answer, sorry.
Great. No, and I'm going to leap ahead because that to the order of questions I thought I was going to ask, because that idea of like how the mind works is something I want to ask you about. And I think this ties into your tonal variation, which is one of the things I love so much about this book. The one sort of emblematic, clear example that I wanted to use as a springboard maybe is "Look, Little Donkeys." So this is a poem that is, if you haven't read it, that's set in Haifa, and there's sort of frivolous love between teenagers. There's parties at a hotel going on. It has one of my favorite sentences I've read in a long time, which is a guy named Guy in love with two classmates named Rudy labors to pronounce dilemma. And the first time I was reading your book, I just couldn't stop reading that sentence. I had to force myself to move on. But in that poem, it references this horrific attack on civilians in a marketplace, in which many people died and many, many more were injured. And that sentence in which that is referenced then is followed by the speaker telling us about the poor choice of boots she purchased. And I'm so fascinated with how that is honest in terms of being human, and how there's a risk with that, but also how there's something political in that orchestration of tone too. So I don't know if you want to talk about that poem in particular, but just your orchestration of tone, which I love how it moves between, again, for instance, like humor and rage at things.
Well, I think those who know me well know that the transition between humor and rage is pretty frequent. Ah, yes. Um, yeah, that poem in particular, that I mean that does reference something that I experienced when I was 16. I had gone on a trip to Israel. It was facilitated through a summer camp that I attended, through the JCC in Eastern Massachusetts. And it was set up as this sort of cultural exchange. Like American Jews would go meet Jews in Israel, would meet Jews from Ukraine, and we would all like get to know each other and like, I don't know, solve world politics. And instead it was like teenagers being teenagers, and some of like a lot of inability to communicate, to be honest. Like the Americans spoke English, and almost exclusively English. The Israelis spoke English and Hebrew, and maybe a couple could speak Ukrainian. The Ukrainians mostly just spoke Ukrainian. So like it was like not connecting. I don't know what the expectations were. So like the to be in that position at that time as a teenager, to be in a place where, an act of political violence occurred in a place where we had been like just a couple days before. Like I think at the time, and maybe this was just being a teenager, I didn't think about it too hard. And like, I can't imagine how terrifying it must have been for folks back home, because it was a time of relative stability. So that I think they just couldn't have really expected it. And while we're there, we're just like, I don't know, I guess we're gonna go swimming, guys. Let's go swimming. And yeah, it felt very disorienting later. Like the more I thought about it, the stranger it felt. And, like obviously it's such a difficult thing to talk about. It's a difficult place to talk about. But yeah, I just felt that it was one of those situations where the only way that I could represent it, my experience there accurately, was to have those really hard swings sometimes. And like, from violence to being like, oh, I went home and the shoes I bought were terrible. And, I bought a cross for my grandmother, which, she wasn't Jewish. But yeah. So yeah, it was just very strange.
No, it does seem like I'm linking that to your moment out at McLeish too, like the fierce honestness with which the poems embrace cognitive dissonance, I think is really prevalent here and one of the real fuels for the collection and the poems. I wanted to ask you about form and your relationship to form because I don't know if people could tell from the reading, but like you're moving in throughout the course of the book. Like sometimes it's regular couplets, sometimes it's regular tercets, sometimes you're deliberately the poem seems to be sticking a spoke in any sense of like regularity, prose like poems, playing with caesuras. So the space, you're rupturing the continuity of a line. So I wondered if you could just talk about your relationship to form and at what point form starts to become really prevalent in your drafting process.
Yeah. It's funny, I'm looking at John Hennessy right here, who was one of my teachers. And this is going to sound very familiar to him, though he was a fiction student at the time. So I had studied at University of Arkansas when I was doing my MFA work. And it was a very formal program. It was very like, you are going to write sonnets, you are going to write villanelles, you are going to write like 50 lines of blank verse and turn it in tomorrow morning and feel terrible about it. Like it was great practice. And I think in a lot of ways it trained my ear so I could go crazy. Like I could just take what I learned and then decide to break it when I wanted to break it. Um, and like I have to say, I'm not writing in receive forms very much anymore. Like I wrote another abecedarian kind of. I haven't finished it, but I started writing one the other day and I was like, oh, this is weird. This is like a formal thing. I don't know what's going on. Um, but yeah, like sometimes I do like the regularity of something like a couplet. Sometimes it's going to be how it feels when I look at it on the page. Sometimes if it's less like formal in its layout, it will still have a lot of like sonic tricks from more formal poems where I'm like, okay, I want to be able to propel this line over a caesura. And for like my folks or non-poets, like a caesura is a break in a line, so it's like a physical break in a line. And sometimes just having those tricks available um, can mean like you can do something different with something appears to not be formal. But yeah.
It does. It seems appropriate that there's a lot of shape shifting with your poems, given your content here too. So one last question I have, and then I'd love to open it up to anyone who has a question for Jen. I'm gonna. My question is gonna be couched in the last poem in the book. I'm so glad you read Duet for Fiddle and Violin. I really love that poem, and there's so we all just heard it and then but I just want to like unpack a moment towards the beginning where you mentioned this the speaker mentions not you a speaker clearly not Jen mentions a film but then says she hasn't seen it, that's not important, then there's a name tag with something illegible on it and it's followed by the line it is either very rare or the other thing. One of the things I love about the poems in this book is like you make so many wonderful claims about the world, but then you also there seems to be a pattern of like leaning into not knowing or a mission or what is illegible and wanting to acknowledge that like there's a retraction that's happening. And as I was trying to say in my intro, like that seems so important towards moving towards elucidation as much as any claim you're making. And you also have, I'm going to paraphrase this and maybe butcher, but you have something, a phrase that talks about how I saw it with my own ridiculous eyes. And I really love how your speakers allow for the ridiculousness of the self or lapses. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that orchestration of self, but I really love it.
I think yeah, the other one, that's the one where and like this the speaker really did this. sees a horse lying down and then goes home and like types into Google, do horses lie down? Like I think it was when I was writing the poem where because like at a certain extent to a certain extent, I'm like concerned for am I representing the world in a way that is like not wholly false. Like I'm not going to say that everything's true and like there's no way that I'm writing a poem and I'm worried about if everything is true because like that's actually not important to me as a poet. But if it feels honest unto itself, like that feels very important. Um and I do, and this is like getting into work that I'm starting to work on now, I feel like that gap between knowing something and then being aware of the limits of what you can know. Um, and also being aware of how much can be lost and what the space for misinterpretation is in between what you think you know and what gets lost. And like, I don't know, that's where the poem is, right? Yeah.
Can bring the mic over to you so people online.
Hi, Jen. Will you tell us about your cover and will you tell all the people on Zoom where they can buy your book from you because they're going to want to?
So the cover, I don't know if it's over there. I don't know if it's on camera. There it is. So Greg got me a shirt that is by the same artist, and I almost wore it tonight, but it's short sleeved and I was so cold. So, and I didn't want to have to cover it up. That'll be my summer guy look. Um, but yeah, this is it's by an artist named Michael McGrath. I found his work the way that most people find work now is that I saw it on Instagram and I just thought, oh, I love this. Um, so I reached out to him and asked if I could use it for the cover, and we were able to get to use it. And I just the sense of a space that is surreal and maybe a little threatening, but also really appealing. Like that, I really get that when I look at his work. And I thought, yeah, that's about right. So the book, right now, it's going to be a little hard to get this book. I'm sure some of you in the audience are going to be nodding your heads at this. The distribution network for small presses, like so small press distribution, it collapsed on Thursday. So we're all reeling a little bit. We don't know, like those of us with books that are trying to sell them through small presses, we don't know what's next. We're trying to figure that out. So I can tell you for right now, these are the books I have, the ones in the room. Anyone out there, I'm so sorry. And as soon as we can resolve this, I do want to find ways to get books to you. I think it might take a while, and I really am grateful for your patience while that happens. But if you are interested and you're not here tonight, um, send me an email. I'll stay in touch and I'll let you know when that's possible. I should also put out a list over there if like you don't want to get one tonight or want to wait for another time like that. I'll at least be able to get in touch later. So yeah, the website it's jenjabaily-blackburn.com or girlinabearsuit.com. Built by one Greg Blackburn. Thank you. So yeah, that's thank you.
Someone else have a question?
Coraline has a question. Okay.
I was hoping.
Why'd you pick Callisto poems and Girl in a Bear Suit as the name of the book?
Oh, that's a super good question. Um, so like why did I pick Girl in a Bear Suit as the name of the book? Why was I writing about Callisto? Yeah. And all of that. Um I thought her story was really interesting, and it was one that I felt like I needed to learn more about. And like there's only so much information you're going to get in the original story. So I thought I'll write more and I'll see what I can learn. Um the title, I have to think, I don't know if he is listening out there. Maybe, maybe not. But my friend, another poet, Tobias Ray, I don't think he's around tonight. It's okay. Um, but he was the one who suggested Girl in a Bear Suit as a possible title. I have a lot of fun with titles, and I think sometimes they're not the most productive titles, and that's not a title of a piece. That is a line in a piece. But I I think sometimes I am just like, well, can't I just call this one another poem? And like that's it. But like, of course, it's not enough. And then sometimes it's like, well, can't you title something in a way that's more helpful, like maybe help someone navigate this poem a bit? And I'm like, well, yeah, I could, but I'm not gonna. And I I think for a book, for the title of the book, I thought it was really important that people really have a sense of what it was about and what it meant. And these poems about like people being different things or multiple things at once, that I thought like, oh yeah, it's like a girl who's wearing a bear suit, like Callisto, who inside feels like the girl that she was, but to the world, she looks like a bear. So yeah. And also thank you, Toby.
So this has been sort of a topic that's been prevalent recently, especially for the concentration and the capstone. And also I know this is a book that took you like a lot of years to put to like to accumulate all these poems. So I was wondering how you went about like organizing those poems and sort of putting those poems in order to create a sort of arc or a sort of through line, and just how you like organized and went about organizing and putting the book together in general.
Um, I wish I could say I did like the right thing and like threw them all on the floor or on the wall and was like, I'm going to do this in the most like informed way possible. I don't think that's what happened. Again, like Toby, my friend Mary, my friend Ashley, like they were the ones probably looking at this book the most as I was putting it together. Um, my friend Aaron saw a lot of these poems. So like it was just reflecting on what they thought would be stuff that contributed to a narrative and being like another set of eyes when I was just like, I'm too close to this material and I can't do it anymore. I also had worked with another poet who I didn't know personally on the manuscript, just like as a consultation. And it was really helpful to have someone who didn't really know me looking at it, and they didn't have to like, couch all of their like they they didn't know about all of my weirdnesses as a person. They could only see my weirdnesses as a poet. So that was like super helpful to me. But like, I don't know, vibes. A lot of times it's just vibes. It's like this poem connects to this poem, connects to this poem, and like it starts to feel right at a certain point.
Maybe two more questions. Yeah.
I have a follow-up to SJ's question. I'm really interested in your like Callisto series and how they aren't just like one suite in the book or one section, rather they're scattered throughout. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about ordering those poems in particular and figuring out what would slot in between and like serve as like breathers or connecting tissue and that type of idea.
Um, that's a good one because it's been so long since I've done it that like right now it's like, oh, it's just the way that it was meant to be, but like no, of course not. Um, I so I've had different versions of this book. At one point, I was sending out a version of this book that was like super short compared to what it is now. And it was one of those things where it hadn't gotten picked up for a while. And this was also my friend's advice that was just like, make it, he called it the Beyonce cut, like make the Beyonce cut, make it like the tightest possible cut of this book and see if people are interested in it. And like they were, some people were interested in it. It was doing okay in like prize competitions and stuff. But it happened to be that I still had the old version out while it was going on, and this happened to be the one that got picked up. So then I had to think at that point, like, okay, do I like radically change it and go with the short version? Or was I just sending around the short version with the idea that I could change it and like add a lot back in later? And ultimately, like I took a little bit out, but it wasn't a ton. But like for the Callisto poems in particular, I did have a version at one point where they were all together and it was just one long sequence. And I think the thing I realized is that tonally they are so all over the place that I couldn't do that. Like it was just they are very volatile poems in a lot of ways. Like they are these voices in direct competition with each other. So I think the way that I wanted to arrange it was start with the poems where there's a lot of context building and world building, and then move into ones where there's a lot more conflict and trying to figure out like, okay, this is my life. Now how do I live it? And then the ones near the end where it's just like feeling more at peace with whatever form it will be. Um, so like, I also at the very end, this is one that I put in late. Like, I don't think I sent around the book with this, but I put in another poem at the very end where it's like I will say for sure, it's me talking to Callisto, like just the idea of Callisto, not girl Callisto, not bear Callisto, just like big, broad Callisto, thinking like, oh, do I have to stop thinking about this now? And like that was such a horrible feeling. Like I spend so much time thinking about this. Am I never going to get to think about this again? And it was like you'll see it if you look in the book, but it's like, yeah, yeah, that's right. But like, yeah, I mean, I know where I stand with that. Like, no, no, Callisto doesn't have to go. So yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, we're out here. I feel like you actually started to answer this question, which is like you have this book now, right? And it's like this complete treasure chest of images and of your obsessions and passions. And so now when you're writing, like after that has bracketed, do you find yourself working in the same vocabulary of like theme and of structure and image? Or is it like, okay, here's my book, like now what?
Um, I found that I still write things in a lot of varied forms. Like I know some people will do like a really tight formal kind of thing after they've written one book and just being like, okay, this is how I get back on track. I'm like, I don't care if I get back on track. Like I want to do the work I feel called to do. Um, so in some cases, that's some prose poems, and ones that are like more narrative and conversational. In some cases, it's poems that are like more sparse lyric, usually couplets that like there may be a narrative, but it's very much like an obscured narrative. Um, and I think like trying to figure out how work fits together is different now. Because I'm not writing toward a well, I shouldn't say that. I'm like not writing toward a tightly defined book project. I have these like broader ideas and trying to figure out how it fits together. But like that's a hard thing. I think a lot of situations people will want to ask, what's your book about? And they want you to have an answer that's immediate, that is understandable, um, that sometimes is marketable, and that's just death as a poet. Like I can't think about how something will be contextualized while I'm doing it. So like I think giving myself the freedom to write in as many different registers, continuing to do that is really helpful for that work.
Okay. Thank you for all of those responses. Thank you for that reading. In just a second, I want to invite people to go over, and we obviously have lots of cheese there, and we have a cake that is decorated as if it was for a 3-year-old birthday. It has a bear and balloons on it, but it's on brand, right? So Coraline's a fan, so we're going to cut into that cake. Two very quick follow-up questions. So first of all, you have a stack of books there. If people want to buy books, how is it? Will they Venmo? People are here in the room?
I can do Venmo. I can do PayPal. I can, to a certain extent, do Tap that has some ability to make change.
So they should just come find you. Okay. And obviously there'll be a chance to ask more questions of Jen. And then one last follow-up thing. And this is maybe a little random, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering if there's anyone here you would want to acknowledge and possibly embarrass with a one-of-a-kind gift. Okay. Yeah. 1 second, and then we're gonna drink wine and eat cheese and cake. It's hard to wait. What is even happening?
So these are super limited edition tote bags, and they are for a couple of frequent audience members who might take up the front row of our readings off to the side. They're down like house right. These are your own Purple Couch Club tote bags. They're the only ones that exist. I can't take credit for the illustration. That was Amelia Burton, a student who had graduated last year and also designed the cover for the Nine Syllables Press anthology. The if you want to know more about Nine Syllables Press, we're happy to tell you. But yeah, you can find us on the web. It's our chapbook press, and Adri, our editor, is right here, doing incredible work. But yeah, so Amelia designed the couch, and then we got your little bags right here. Love you guys. Go continue me and Bobo. Yay! There's more than one front row. Aw. Love you guys. And sorry, I don't know where the camera is right now. So if you're getting like, sort of floating torso, sorry, internet. But thanks for sticking around and thanks for listening. Yeah. All right. All right. Should we do you want to go push the button, Frank? Do you want to turn off the Zoom? I think we can do it up here. Anyway, good night everyone. Bye.